I mean, I am, frankly, remain haunted from the interview that a couple interviews that you and I did more than 2 years ago now, I guess it was at the end of 2016. Maybe it was prior to before Trump actually was inaugurated, when we talked about what could happen. Like, what are we're about to find out what the implications are of a completely untethered foreign policy, and one that was stripped of expertise and apparatus and an agenda. And I don't know that we're seeing the implications yet, but we're starting to see the contours of how bad it can look in real time. But in many respects, my fear is that this is stuff that we're not going to be able to fully assess just how problematic what's going on now is. We won't be able to fully assess how problematic it is for 5, 10 years, maybe 20 years out. So with an eye to that, just give us what you were looking at and what you thought was really problematic relative to our relationship with Europe and with NATO.
Well, very much to your point. I actually feel like every day since the president got back from Europe, we've kind of found out some new problematic thing that wasn't immediately apparent. You know, today it is that the president actually chatted with Putin about the possibility of interviewing and prosecuting Americans, including a former American ambassador to Russia, that the president thought this was an appropriate thing to discuss in a one-on-one bilateral, and that the White House still can't tell reporters whether, what it is they think about this. So you don't even have to go to our relations with Europe, that you've just seen an American president kind of casually dismiss the integrity, the skills of his own diplomatic apparatus, his own intelligence apparatus, his own law enforcement apparatus, and what that means for, the already demoralized federal government workforce, what it means for anyone having any belief that government can do anything. That's something we're going to see spin out over the years. So that's, and, also how many people say, well, the hell with it. Who cares if I take bribes? Who cares if I'm dishonest on the job? Doesn't matter anyway. So that, as you say, is something we're going to see spin out for a long time. Second, you had all last week that just incredibly embarrassing show of dunning and threatening our European allies. And so first, why should any foreign government trust an American leader to do what he or she says? Or supposing an American leader comes along in 2 years and says, okay, hey, we've changed our mind. We totally believe in the alliance. We take it really seriously. We would come to the defense of Montenegro if it were attacked. The Europeans will look at us and say, yeah, well, sure, but we understand how your elections work. And in 4 more years, we'll just be back to what we had before. So again, whether you loved or didn't love the sort of U.S. hegemony or the U.S. unipolar moment, there was a certain amount of predictability in how the U.S. would behave that other governments could plan around, and that limited the amount of adventurousness that, say, Russia or others thought they could undertake with respect to their smaller and weaker neighbors. And what you've already seen in the last 18 months, but we're going to see a dramatic uptick in, is no one knows what the limits are anymore. And those are the moments where miscalculations happen. Those are the moments where wars that are costly for everyone happen. So that's my long-term, rather doom and gloomy readout of the long-term consequences of what we saw unleashed over the last week.
Right. I mean, I got to imagine that foreign leaders, many of us, and certainly there's some, there's plenty of Americans who are, perfectly happy with Donald Trump as president. There are others of us who say, oh, this is an anomaly, right? And the rest of the world realize, like, he's the lunatic, and this is just, it happened because of some weird thing with our electoral college, and because Comey had the letter, and Hillary Clinton maybe maybe miscalculated in her campaign and she wasn't a great candidate. All these different reasons, these foreign leaders will understand it. But it would be irrational for them to not assume that we're an unstable country, right? Like, I mean, the fact that we could, even with all those factors, elect someone like Donald Trump has got to send a message to the rest of the world, like, you cannot count on us. However you were using us as some type of watershed, we're unmoored now. And, so we're a moving target. You're going to have to plan. You're going to have to use, you're going to have to look to a different beach if you, if you need some type of sightline for, where the horizon is or something.
What you're really seeing in Europe is leaders who, for the first 18 months, it's a little bit like the stages of grief. There was this, well, we'll figure out how to deal with Trump. We'll figure out how to flatter Trump. We'll figure out how to stage events that he likes. Macron gives him a parade. They come to Washington. They offer deals. Then they say, okay, that didn't work. Maybe we can just wait him out. If we can hold on for 4 years and then things can go back to the way they used to be. Now you more and more see leaders talking publicly. The German foreign minister was the most recent person, but not the only one, to say, look, we need to make other arrangements. We need to move on. We need to figure out what European security and European prosperity look like without the U.S. as senior partner. And to that end, yesterday, Europe and Japan signed the largest trade deal in the history of trade deals. And you might say, oh, that's fine. What does that have to do with us? Among other interesting things that happened, Japan actually reduced its tariffs on the import of cars from Europe, which is something that the U.S. sought for years and years without any movement whatsoever. And as you listeners probably know, totally failed to figure out how to export cars to Japan. Well, hey, what did Donald Trump say he was going to do? Bring the automotive industry home. Guess who gets to export cars to Japan? Europe does. And we're going to see that kind of thing, both on the economic side and the security side, over and over as countries decide that they can't afford to wait and see if we come to our senses and see if it's permanent.
Yeah, that is that's pretty stunning, and I guess that's a just one narrow example of what we can expect in the years to come. All right, well, I want to take a break, and I want to get your sense as to the different reasons why you felt this meeting with Putin was catastrophic. And if you could also, when we come back, place it into context. Like, even if Donald Trump had not had that press conference, but simply went in without a stated agenda, without one that was announced, without one that we were aware of, without any benchmarks, without any of this, I mean, would that have been normal and non-catastrophic in and of itself? And then, too, I want you to speak more, if you can, and give us an overview to the extent that you can on this notion of of Russia being ready to charge U.S. officials for financial crimes. This seems like a slight diversion, but we got to take a break. We'll be back with Heather Hurlbert in just a moment.